here with David Ting. I'm Tyson Graham, head of sales at Vue Storefront, and we just had the opportunity to help David and his team kind of reevaluate their commerce architecture and make a move off of ATG towards sort of their future stack and really start to embrace the mock architecture and everything that is sort of composable and this headless reality. And so early on, we were, talking to David about, what was the best path to moving away from ATG and starting to kind of put the pieces together for a really, composable, customer-centric strategy. And so through that, we learned a lot in terms of, what were these different use cases and a lot of challenges. So like today, getting to connect here in Vegas, I'm hoping to just kind of tap into, David's reality, some of his point of view, for any other, CTOs out there thinking about how do we re-platform, how do we go composable, what's that kind of first step to really take so that you can kind of maximize the velocity like you guys were able to, but also reduce the risk of kind of just going off into the open without a real clear direction. So, what do you think the real key to sort of thinking about going from that monolithic reality towards that composable future that you guys were able to do?
Tyson, thank you for having me here. At Zenni Optical, maybe I'll give a little bit of background about the company and some of the roadmap ahead. So I actually feel like when you trying to figure out your architecture, first you need to understand the trajectory of a business. So maybe I'll go through a little bit about Zenni. So Zenni has been around for 20 years. We're direct to consumer, so vertically integrated. We own our own manufacturing. We scaled through a lot of marketing as well as brand spend over the last 10 years. So with my addition last year in June, it's really our hope is to add technology to speed up and accelerate the digital transformation for the company. So as part of that, when I came into the business, there's a couple set of questions I asked. First of all, is direct to consumer the only model that we're gonna employ? That's a really key question for us because I felt like manufacturing is an advantage for Zenni Optical, where there's a lot of capacity that's yet unused. And so I pushed the company to really start thinking really hard about business to business sales, white label. And then through that, we want to package technology as part of the solution because we are wrapping 20 years of best practices for e-commerce and try to provide people who've been only brick and mortar another way of thinking about their business where they can monetize and sell on the web. So because of that, there's a couple things that we learned. So first of all, we want to white label. That means that we want to show many experiences. It's not only Zenni's experience. So having a flexible platform like Vue Storefront is extremely important, where we can quickly customize the look and feel and also potentially change the workflow depending on some of the business rules required for some of our partners. The second thing that is important too is that as I explored, headless commerce is always a great buzzword. But when you start looking at the cost of headless commerce, you have to do the calculation. It's probably very affordable when you're small scale, maybe say, 7 figures or 8 figures in revenue. But then when you get to 9 or 10 figures in revenue, giving away like a percentage or 2% of your revenue to a headless commerce platform is not actually the best spend. So we did an ROI analysis for us to build our own. And we took advantage of the mock alliance's standard spec. So we had the ability to flexibly switch our backend if needed. So giving people some context, we originally slated to move from ATG to Commerce Tools, which is the project I canceled because of that ROI is not there as you scale. We actually are looking into building up our own services stack, following the mock standard and spec, and with that, building on top of Magento 2, for example, with that not paying a fee for headless commerce.
Thanks a lot, David. And one of the things that I think is fascinating is how you're one of the rare companies that's looking at B2C and B2B or B2B2C Rarely do we see, the same organization rolling out experiences in both of those realms. And so I think for us, what I'd love to hear is what's really the difference when somebody's thinking about, in your case, between sort of the experience in the B2C reality versus B2B, and like why does taking this kind of front end first approach to a mock stack lend itself to being able to be successful for both of those use cases?
Great question, Tyson. So if I look at the forte of Zenni is manufacturing high quality eyewear at the lowest cost possible. So we figured out this vertical integration over the last 20 years, and we know we are the best when it comes to that. Because of that, I'm starting to look at B2B and B2C as different channels for distribution. So having that flexibility on the front end, we don't have to be the brand. So Zenni is one of the possibility of pushing out the brand. So we're willing to completely customize the experience from like the purchase, the online experience, down to the unboxing, to even like the labels that are on the frames themselves. We can white label the experience and help other people to do the brands themselves and own that IP as basically the brand. So I think like if you look at consumers would love to have aspirational brands, right? So they're moving from fast fashion, which is very bad for the environment and doesn't have the everlasting effect of something that's nice that basically lasts forever. So with that shift, I do think like a brand-centric approach where Zenni doesn't have to be a brand, but could be multiple brands, and start thinking about it as an omni-channel distribution strategy actually start making sense. Because brand actually has very, very distinct tastes on how the brand needs to be presented. This is where like the customizability of Vue Storefront becomes extremely important, because one flow or one experience does not actually do it all. We actually believe that multiple being flexible and letting the artists or the brand owners having the creative freedom is key to win over time.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just to be clear, I mean, they're really implementing a pretty custom experience for each one of their customers, right? So they're bringing in the style guide, they're bringing in, copy for, their customers inside of that B2B reality. And so if you were, looking at doing it, on your own, and your previous approach that you'd considered and ultimately ruled out, which was building it on your own, what would be sort of the downside, I guess, there? Is it more about velocity that you find that you're gaining by going with, a front end first kind of mock stack and that just composable approach to everything? Or is it, something else, I guess, that makes you kind of see that as the clear cut favorite for someone who wants to deliver kind of a multitude of experiences like that?
So I actually look at Vue as a bundle of e-commerce best practices. So as you evolve as a platform and started from open source now to enterprise, not only you have the back-end connection and configurability on the front end, the best practices are configurations that you enable. So because of that, you can improve the velocity. What we want is a framework that we build on, which the collection improves over time. And then through a set of configurations, we can rapidly launch different brands or different partners with lower and lower costs by investing in that platform. So those are the reasons why we're looking for front end as a service. On top of it, looking for a partner to build together versus trying to tackle this problem ourselves.
So you're really leveraging sort of the best practices capabilities from different vendors at every layer of the stack, and then being able to kind of allocate your time, money, and talent of your team, I guess, towards really innovating better experiences.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm thinking, is that as technologists, there's a temptation to build everything on your own. But when you're looking at like successful businesses, I believe like you spend your time on the differentiation and get the user experience the best. So if you have to build everything on your own, there's way too much to build. Finding right partners where you can share best practices, learn together, where the partner learns from many businesses by working with them and learn faster than Zenni, because Zenni is one business. I believe that we'll get to the end goal faster by partnering together between Vue Storefront and Zenni.
That's great. And one thing that I wanted to call out too that I've learned from you and your team, and I think it's been a huge insight for everybody at Vue Storefront, is that, you know, bringing the developer experience into, you know, the next generation and modernizing that is a lot of what happens with Vue Storefront, and approaching things with a mock stack is generally that the experience for employees, you know, developers specifically, but also digital experience people, is, you know, dramatically better. And as a result, they're building better experiences for customers because it's more enjoyable to come to work. It's faster to check in code. And so I think that's something that's sort of hidden in plain sight, that oftentimes, you know, we think a lot about the customer experience, but the reason why those great customer experiences are coming out faster and, you know, better is because engineers and experienced people like using the technology a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to elaborate, like Tyson, you hit a good point. What does it mean to be a technology company? So modern developers, and then being a good basically technology company, you want to hire the best developers available. So developers are still extremely difficult to find, and especially the good ones. They want to see their work rapidly tested out there. They want to see they're moving things, they're improving things, and their code matters. So having a great developer experience is not only a recruiting tool, it's also a retention tool. I believe that like at Zenni, I believe in what's called a maker culture, where you have subject matter experts working on projects and you want to enable them with tools, and they make the decision because they are writing the code. They're the closest to the decision. So because of that, you have to actually invest in the tool set they work with so that they can move at rapid velocity and make great decisions armed with data, as well as having a palette of great tools to work with, and then building great experiences quickly. So because of that, if you look at that, this is really why I believe, like, when you look at the build process, the automation, the test framework, when things are built with like structured, you know, modular components, there's less bugs, and then your velocity improves. So where you can build a differentiation, as I talked about, creating value versus really just building out the plumbing and just getting the basic application to work. So I think like there's two metrics like a CTO should look at. One is impacts by time. So you want the greatest amount of impact in the shortest amount of time possible. And then the other one is like productivity per employee or developer. I think with the advent and push of AI, you'll see like code generation becoming more and more prevalent. Because of that, you should actually expect that productivity to increase. And I do think like a framework like Vue Storefront actually helps accelerate that productivity increase.
That's awesome advice, because I think that's really what we love to tap into is that point of view. I know so many CTOs are sort of on the precipice of saying, hey, is it now that I pull the trigger and move forward with, you know, composable architecture? I think more and more people are getting clear that the most customer-centric approach is composable architecture. And so just getting clarity on, hey, what's that first step? How do we get started? And seeing you guys do it with the front end as a service as step one to pulling together the greater stack has revealed a lot. So I mean, is there anything else you would sort of give as a sort of parting words to any other sort of leaders out there thinking about how to go forward with the least amount of risk and the most success?
I think like as a good leader, CTO, the job is being a scout out there, looking at technology trends, looking for good partners, developing that relationship so that the companies can grow together. So when you look at e-commerce, a lot of the problems are understood for decades now. So best practices are things that are figured out, and you could actually look for bundled set of code services, allow you to do rapid development. So instead of looking at everything where you had to build everything, focus on the things that differentiate your business and partner to the other things that you believe that somebody else could do a better job than you. That lowers your cost structure as well as improve your velocity by focusing on your unique business logic. The other advice I have is that I think there's a temptation to look at building everything from scratch. One of the things you have to look at is the consumer behavior is changing so fast that with like the millennials and Gen Z, their behavior, when you build the best experience for that behavior, think about that behavior changing on an annual basis or every 6 months. Because of that, if you had to catch up or be in front of that, you have to think about like rebuilding your stack at that velocity. So if you start looking at your code and where you change it, that decouple, like front end as a service becomes key, where, having things loosely coupled, where you can swap out components based on some of the new behaviors and new changes, I think that's a way to go. Versus like the old school where you spend a year or 2 years building everything from scratch, you get the perfect experience. By the time you launch it, the world has changed. So maybe you don't have the right thing anymore, right? Then you start chasing the next pattern and you're basically a follower versus being a leader.
I love that. I think you really nailed a huge point there, is that optionality, because we really do hope to be the last front end that you ever need in that approach of being agnostic, so that people can move things in and out, like you said, and kind of skate to where the puck is going, as opposed to kind of being on your heels and being reactionary. So I think that's the huge payoff, is that you can focus on the future and then be confident that when you need to move something out and something new in, you're able to do that without disturbing the customer experience. So really great point. I think that's really all for me, and I appreciate all the insight and guidance to other people kind of making that composable decision.
Well, thank you, Tyson, for the opportunity. Really appreciate the chance to catch up together in Vegas. Congratulations on the huge raise, and we look forward to being good partners for years to come.
Absolutely. Best is yet to come.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.